Hello. So we're back taking a look at standard jazz tunes, and this is one of the most standard of all jazz tunes. It's called All of Me, written in 1931 and made famous by Billie Holiday in about 1941. This one's in the key of C major. It's often in the key of B flat major as well. So before we embark on soloing and chord melody and that kind of thing, what we should do first is analyze the form. So it basically, it's a roadmap for where we're going. And so, as I said already, we're in the key of C major. Let's move on from there. I've often used All of Me to teach secondary dominants, and that's what I am going to do today as well, because this is rife with the secondary dominant chord. So, what is a secondary dominant chord? First of all, let's explain the primary dominant chord. The primary dominant chord in the key of C major would be the 5 chord, or in the case of C major, a G7 chord. And that primary dominant's role is to resolve back to the tonic chord. So I mean, you can hear you'll hear this tritone sound. You see that G7. You can hear where it wants to go. It doesn't matter where you play it. In each case, it's a G7 chord, and that clearly that G7 chord wants to return to the tonic chord. All right, and we call it the primary dominant chord because all the notes of the chord come from the C major scale, or the tonic scale, if you will, being C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, the C major scale, and the notes of the 5 chord, the G7 chord, would be G, B, D, and F out of that scale. And so, because all the notes come out of the C major scale, it's called the primary dominant. A secondary dominant is when we sneak a note from a different scale, and in fact temporarily we modulate or change key, but we don't really. It's not even really perceived as a key change, but we still have to recognize it as being outside of the C major scale. So let's take a look at first the E7 chord. So we start with the C major 7, which it says on the chart. Obviously, we could use other chords, but we're going to stick to the chart. C major 7, and all of the notes in the C major 7 chord come out of the C major scale. So we call that chord diatonic. Diatonic, that word means according to the scale. Then we move to the next chord, which is an E7 chord. And not all of the notes in this chord come from the C major scale. So we have to give this chord a different function and a different name. In the E7 chord, you can see that we have this G sharp, and that G sharp is going to lead somewhere. And where it wants to lead is to the A. All right. So that dominant chord, we call that a secondary dominant, and that secondary dominant it would be leading to would be the 5 chord in the key of A. All right, that's the easiest way to explain it. So 5 chord in the key of A. Why do you want to know that? There's a lot of talk online about soloing, guitar soloing. I mean, honestly, I could not believe how many people are online, telling each other how to solo. But the best place to start is to know what you're soloing on, right? And so an E7 chord is not built from a C major scale. It's not an alteration of the C major scale or anything like that. It's actually built on. We have to look at it as being built on the A major scale. And so if you're playing a solo over a tune like All of Me, you're going to be going from, the key of C major in the first two measures to the key of A major in the next two measures. A major because E7 is the 5 chord in the key of A major. And then that E7 leads to yet another secondary dominant. And this secondary dominant, we call this a secondary dominant as well because there's a note in this A7 chord that does not come out of the C major scale. And that note is a C sharp. If I were to play the chord of A7, there's that C sharp, right? And that C sharp wants to go to a D minor. Or the D, actually the D. You can hear that strong leading tone leading its way up to the next chord in the key. So I'm just going to play the first 8 measures and just listen to those secondary dominants. I'm not going to play it in a rhythm style because then the fretboard tracker won't follow me along. So what we'll do is just play them slowly just so you can hear the chords, all right? So the first chord, C major 7, and then E7, all right, so you can hear those leading tones, that G sharp going to an A, and that C sharp moving to the D minor in this case. So the E7 is the 5 chord in the key of A major or in the key of A minor. And the A7 chord is the 5 chord in the key of D minor or the key of D major. All right. And then we come up with another, at measure 9, we come up with another E7. Right. And then, as we said, that's a 5 chord of A minor. And lo and behold, there is A minor. If I voice this more clearly, or let's say I go up here, let's say I voice the E7 up here and I have a G sharp up on the top, and then clearly it wants to go right. See, and then another secondary dominant. We haven't encountered this one yet. It's the D7. And the D7 is, I'll just tell you, the D7 is the 5 chord in the key of G. If we go to the key of G, you can just count G, A, B, C, D. There it is. The 5 chord in the key of G is a D7. Again, another secondary dominant, right? Because we don't get that dominant from the key of C major. It's not diatonic. So if you're soloing over let's say the D7 chord, you'll have to define that F sharp note, right? If you don't get that F sharp note, it's going to sound wrong, most likely. And so the right notes in the chord are always a pretty good place to start. You can get as creative as you want, but to know what the notes in the chord are sort of important. And then the D7 tricks you a little bit and doesn't actually immediately resolve to the G. Instead, there's an interpolation of I forget that word for now, is an interpolation of a D minor 7. And then sort of a delayed resolution to the G7 chord. Okay, so from the beginning we have 1 chord of C major. We have what we call the 3/7 chord. or in other words, the chord that's built on the third degree of the scale, but it's a secondary dominant. So when we say 3/7, we know that it's a 7 chord, and then we have a 6/7, the A7, and then we have the 2 minor, which is diatonic in the key of C major. Then again, we have that repeating 3/7 chord, which is sort of quite characteristic in this song. You know, a great way to memorize tunes is what we're doing right now. Not only does it teach you how to solo over the tune, but it also teaches you how to define the chord progression and what makes and teach you what makes each tune and each song's chord progression and unique. And one of the things that sort of is a characteristic of this tune is that 3/7 chord coming after the 1 chord. So again, the 1 C major is the 1, E7 is the 3 or the 3/7. 6 chord is the 6/7 is again a secondary dominant. The diatonic 2 chord, then the 3/7 chord again, then the diatonic 6 chord, the relative minor, then the 2/7 chord, also the 5 chord in the key of G, and then the diatonic 2 chord, and then the 5 chord, the primary dominant chord, the G7 chord. All of the notes of that G7 chord come from the diatonic scale, the C major scale. Okay, so then we're on to the B section, and you'll note that the first 8 measures of the B section are all identical to the first 8 measures of the A section. So we just repeat the same thing. One chord C major 7, the 3/7 chord secondary dominant, the 6/7 chord secondary dominant, the 2 diatonic 2 chord, and then we have a tag, sort of like an 8 measure long tag here. It goes to the 4 chord, diatonic 4 chord. I don't know if you know what this is, but we're going to give this a name. That F minor chord is called the 4 minor chord. That 4 minor chord comes from the parallel minor key. Parallel minor key meaning the key of C minor. So this is we sneak the that's a whole other topic, but you know we'll touch on it. Parallel minor. This is the parallel minor from the key parallel minor key of C minor, and then let's skip this C major because I don't want to. It's sort of redundant in this chart. Let's forget the C major. By C major, we know it's a 1 chord. Then we do a little cycle. E minor 7. Now the E minor 7 is diatonic in the key. And then A7 is the 6/7 secondary dominant again, and the 2 minor 7 is diatonic in the key. That means all the notes come out of the key of C major, and then we have the primary dominant G7 as the 5 chord, the diatonic 5 chord, or the primary dominant. And then finally we return to the 1 chord. In this case, it's a C6 chord. All the notes of the C6 chord are also derived from the parent scale of C major. So that's a harmonic analysis of the chord progression. I'm not going to bother analyzing the bracketed turnaround because there's 100 different turnarounds you can put in that position. So we won't, I won't get into at this stage an analysis of what an E flat diminished chord is. Okay, so now if we go back to the top and we try to do a harmonic map here. The first 2 measures we could do. I'm just giving you some common suggestions. The first two measures we can play C major scale. The next two measures we could play an A major scale because of the G sharp and because of the 5 chord being out of the A major scale. The next two measures, A7, we could do a D major scale because it's the 5 chord in D major. And then we get this cool little parallel, to the parallel minor thing where we would actually, the D minor chord we could play as a C major scale. But if we're starting that C major scale on the D note, that would give us a little bit more of a Dorian sound for there, right? So it's going to be a minor sound, and then E7 again, A major, and then we have that cool little parallel minor thing happening again, right? Where we have an A minor scale first an A major scale because E7 is the 5 chord. And then we go to the A minor scale because we have a 6 chord relative to the key of C major. And then the D7 is secondary dominant 5 chord leading to G major. So play G major, and then the only difference between G major and the last two chords is going to be that F sharp note. So you're just going to lower the F sharp note and play a C major scale at that last bit there. The same thing repeats itself, when you play the B section. And we've already explained that the first 8 measures are the same as the second set of the second 8 measures are the same as the first 8 measures. So we won't cover that again. And then when we get to the F, that's just a 4 chord. That's just going to be, it's a diatonic 4 chord. All the notes are going to come out of the key of C major, or the C major scale. F minor is a different trip because you've got, now, that's not C major. That's going to have to be C minor because you've gone to the parallel minor of C. By the way, great way to practice, one really good way to practice, and I don't know where you're at with your scales, but is to play your major scale positions and then play your minor scales in parallel. Meaning, I'm just going to do this slowly. So you can see and hear C major, C minor, right? So you can hear that very, very clearly minor. So that would be parallel major and parallel minor because I've played a major and a minor from the same root. All right. So in other words, C major and C minor, same root, parallel. All right. So F minor, you're going to play. Yeah, you can play a C minor. Because it's going to be it's going to be the F minor is the 4 chord in C minor, and then skip that C, go right to the E minor. That is diatonic in the key of C. You can stick to the key of C, and then A7 is a secondary dominant from the key of D major. And then we have a 2 chord, and then we have a 5 chord in the key of C major, diatonic, ending on a C major chord. All right, so now that is just one way of looking at soloing. And this is not like the answer to soloing, but it's a really, really good start. There are all sorts of different things that you can do, but this gives a really, really firm foundation and a harmonic understanding of where you're going when you're building a solo. And that harmonic understanding should relate directly to the chord progression itself. I should mention the form of the tune as well. It's basically just like it says here, A, B, right? So the A section is, the B section is the same as the A section in the first 8 measures. But then you have sort of this long tag at the end of the B section, and that leads you back to the top of the tune. All right, so that's that's an analysis, a harmonic analysis. Again, secondary dominant is the big word there. And secondary dominants mean that they're dominants that are related to the key, but they're not drawn from. They don't. They're not a result of the C major scale, right? Okay, and so that should get you off to a good start. I think that should give you an understanding when you're learning to solo over a tune like this. I would actually do a harmonic map, right? I'd write a bracket over the top and go, I'm going to solo in C major and then A major and D major and then D minor and A major and then A minor and G major and then C major, right? Just bracket those over the top, and it should sound right. You shouldn't. It should indicate the melody. It should indicate the harmony. Your solo should. You shouldn't just go launching off into outer space, ready, set, go, whoopee, now I get to play as fast as I can. That's not what it's about. It's about variations on the melody. That's what you're playing. That's no small deal. I mean, Bach and Mozart were doing variations on simple melodies, and that's what you're doing here, right? You're just doing variations on the melody, variations on the harmony. So good. That's it. If you got anything out of this, make sure to give us a like and subscribe if you want to stick around for longer. We intend to do. I intend to do a lot of these. Yeah. So good. I think that'll be a help.